Welcome to Act 2 You're On. Join us weekly at our studio roundtable as Rhonda, Kate, and Linda invite spectacular guests to weigh in on staying sexy, vibrant, and healthy. Launch your next great act with authenticity and purpose. Summon your courage, superstar, and step into the limelight. So grab a coffee
or a martini
and let's set the stage for a grand entrance. It's Act 2.
You're on.
Greetings, friends. I am Kate Levy, and I am joined by my wonderful co-hosts,
Linda Ty
and Rhonda Garvin-Conaway.
We have such a great podcast for you folks. And I'll start by saying I have a deep, abiding love, passion really for the visual arts. I'm not a visual artist, but I love it. I find it intoxicating. And I have often wondered if people are born with the artistic eye or do they develop it over a lifetime? I have especially wondered this about photographers. And so maybe I'll get my answer today when we talk to a truly gifted artist photographer, Stephanie Vegliante, whose work is stunningly evocative. In fact, the imagery has been described as being as artfully crafted as it is alive with emotion. That's gorgeous. I love that. So let me read you a little bit about her bio before we get to talk. Stephanie is known for her timeless and authentically engaging imagery. Stephanie is the owner and creative artist behind Stephanie Vegliante Photography. Over the past decade, she has honed the craft of creating a comfortable and relaxed atmosphere to capture her clients in their finest light. Her internationally acclaimed work has taken her from Napa Valley to Hong Kong, with her clientele ranging from well-known household names to local Bostonians. She works with both film and digital mediums and brings deep technical acumen, a strong point of view, and unwavering poise and professionalism to her impressive body of work. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we are thrilled you're here. I love your work. So I can't wait for our listeners and our viewers to get to know you and get to know your artwork. Stephanie, you believe in the transformative power of balance, of honing the intricacies of your craft while remaining open to fresh perspectives and unexpected sources of inspiration. Your work is informed by a deep-rooted belief in merging intentionality with creativity.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, you create art for your clientele that captures their essence and brings them back to their most favorite moments in time. That's good life work, and that's good mission work.
Thank you. Thank you. I try.
I think you succeed. I joke that I have a few photographs of my children in my house, that if my house, well, I should knock on wood, if I had to evacuate, those were the only things I would take because they grab a moment of my children's childhood that I couldn't recapture. And I said this to the photographer who had taken them, and she said, please leave your house. I have copies.
That's a good point. I think of that also, though. When I was born, all those pictures are on film and they're printed out. And if they're gone, they're gone. So I understand.
Yeah. So I guess I'll get my own selfish question asked here. And that's what brought you first to photography? And the second part of the question is, have you always had the artistic eye, or did it develop, or did something click at some point?
Photography more or less found me. I always had a camera growing up. I think I was given my first DSLR camera when I was 14 or 15 by my parents. I had no idea how to use it. It was always on auto mode, but I would drive my sister crazy. I would drag her into the backyard. I would dress her up and I would force her into these portrait sessions. I remember my mom scolding me, just saying, she's had enough, she's done. But I just always had a camera in my bag. I was the obnoxious friend that was capturing everything. And I used to say to my friends, when we're older, you're going to be so glad that I had this with me. And I think just from probably 12 years old, 11 years old, from then on, I always had a camera. I absolutely loved photography. I took photography courses in high school. They actually built a class for me because I was so interested in the art. I had a free period and I said, can I do more photography? So they built a class for me. It really just sparked my interest. And when thinking of what I wanted to do in college, I was always a dancer growing up, and that just seemed natural. But the more I thought about it, the more I said, what do I love to do? And it turned out to be photography. At that time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea about wedding photography. I was really very clueless and technically not completely there to be in the professional field. I received my BFA in photography. I studied abroad on a Greek island, which was huge for my skills. There was a lot of one-on-one training just because the art school that I trained at was very small and intimate. So they were able to give you that, 24-hour attention for whatever you needed. I think that was really, really great for my artistic growth. And then I worked with many seasoned professionals throughout Newport, throughout Boston, just really honing the craft. Because like I said, I didn't have any of the technical acumen that I needed. I didn't have business sense, anything along those lines. My parents were incredibly helpful as business people themselves, but really learning how to do the craft, it had to come from just doing it yourself. So I was kind of thrown into that. I worked very, very hard. I would photograph 3 weddings in 3 different states for the person I worked for in one weekend. And then I would work all week. I was in my early 20s, so I had no idea how crazy that was. And I was doing it for pennies. I did not make much money. It was just about the hustle. I did what I had to do, but I really, really loved it. So I would say photography absolutely found me, and then it just continued growing, and everything kind of just fell into place with a lot of hard work. And what was your second question?
My second question was, I think you answered it. Have you always had the artistic eye, or did it develop over time? So it sounds like it's kind of a combination.
I think I always had the eye. I definitely did not have the skills. Those had to be learned for sure.
Yeah. And that's the thing about art, is that you can have a natural ability, but then it takes the hustle, that effort, and that passion that drives you to get good at what you do. And so you were a dancer. Did you try other mediums? And what was it about photography that just lit you up?
It was just photography. I think I always loved art growing up. When you're a little kid, people want to be firefighters or astronauts. I said, I wanted to be an artist or a writer. So I always really enjoyed art in general, never to a higher level. I do have a lot of family that's in the arts. My sister's a dancer. My cousin's a professional painter. So we do have that kind of floating around in the family. But this really just found me, and it just stood out to me. And I think a lot of people now with social media are realizing how great this art form is. Everyone loves taking pictures. It's just completely exploded, which has changed my industry quite a bit. But I think just in general, photography has just become an everyday thing for most people.
Absolutely. How would you say it has changed your industry? Because I have thought about that as well. Everyone's out taking their selfies and doing their, and everything has to be a photo now, right? On social media. Yeah. Or a video.
So when I started in the industry, it was still along the cusp of digital still being newer. Most people for their wedding photography in particular would hire who took their senior portraits. So it was, I know this photographer, they did a great job, I'm going to hire them. It wasn't really as much of an artistic choice. It was just kind of across the board. Oh, you're a photographer, you photograph weddings? Great. I'm going to hire you because you know what you're doing. It was kind of cookie cutter. And now with social media, photographers are able to get their work out there. But I think a lot of people who otherwise would not have kind of thrown themselves into that industry or taken on a business of photography, they've realized, I can have a small piece of the pie. I may not be a luxury wedding photographer, but I can still do portraits or families. And if it's something they enjoy, they're just turning it into a business almost overnight. Social media gives you that outlet to kind of have that as an option.
It definitely does, but that's certainly not the kind of work that you are doing. I mean, your work is, it's exquisite. I mean, it really, it stands out. It stands out, above and beyond, I think, all the rest. Like, it really, you're not, just any photographer out there. And so I wanted to know was it your mission to travel all over the world, to be, does people wanting to, have you be their photographer all over the world, or is it something that just happened? Can you talk about that? Like, was it intentional or?
Sure. So in college, I really gained a heavy travel bug. I went to Paris on a whim with some friends. And from then on, I just knew I have to travel. So I was single for quite a while, and I would work constantly. So I would save a lot of money, and I would see which of my friends was willing to take a trip on a whim anywhere. And I just started traveling the world as often as I could. It kind of just happened that where I would travel, I would try and find couples that I could photograph, whether it was through an ad or social media or a link through friends. And I built my portfolio as much as I could everywhere that I could. And then a couple of years ago, I received an inquiry from a planner in Paris that I had been in touch with. She said, next month, I have a client coming from California getting married in Paris. They're eloping. It's a very small wedding. It's on a Monday. Are you available? And I photographed a wedding in Newport on Saturday. I left on Sunday for Paris. I arrived at 10 in the morning on Monday, and I photographed the wedding at noon. And that was kind of my first kickoff to an international wedding. Granted, that is not the normal circumstance. That's not really how I work anymore, but the opportunity of that was amazing. And it really showed me that, I can do this. I can go around and find fun couples to photograph on my travels, but I can also do this as part of my career. COVID threw a big wrench in that. But my goal is still to do at least one international group of work a year, whether it's a wedding or a portrait session or something along those lines. My goal has always been to travel to a different country outside the US each year. And if I can bring my work with me, that would be amazing.
It is amazing. And your work is amazing. So if you're listening to this podcast, please check out the work that Stephanie produces. It's very impressive and it touches you. There's something very spiritual or soulful about the visions and the visuals that you offer. I love also in this conversation how you've painted a picture for us about being in that backyard to Greece and then Paris, and not a straight line, but in that you've been all over. Where might your favorite place to be to take your pictures? What location is your ideal shoot?
So I love Paris. I absolutely love it there. That being said, really new places are a huge creative outlet for me. So I've actually kind of crafted a new business plan. One of those ideas that I'm kind of following through with is that I'm only trying to photograph at places one time per year now. So I used to photograph at venues multiple times in a year. I think one year I had 12 weddings at one venue, and I'm so grateful for the work. However, everything starts to look the same. When I arrive on site, it's just kind of going through the motions. And that is not something I ever want to do to my clients or myself. You just feel as though you have the same portfolio over and over. So really at this point, anywhere new is thrilling for me. When I work with wedding planners, which I'm exclusively doing now, we kind of discuss the overall aesthetic of the different venues and, what we can bring that's new, just because Pinterest is oversaturated with work. And when clients go in and a bride's looking for her wedding style, she might be typing something in and everything looks the same. Everything comes up the same. So I find that having new venues, new places, whether it's, in New England or internationally, or even just nationally on, the West Coast or something along those lines, anywhere new that we can bring a new set of eyes and a new design to really lights up my creativity and is a huge just creative outlet for me.
I hear your passion in that. And I also hear the commitment to what you really believe in. Going through the motions is not going to work for you. And I think that's so important for all of us to hear in whatever it is that we do, that we're in alignment with our values and what we really believe in. Otherwise, then why did we begin doing it in the first place? So that is such an important lesson that you just shared in that story. I'm also really curious about something else, and I think many of us are curious about this one. Our production team offered this question. How do we all look our best when we're in front of a camera? What can you offer us?
That's a great question. And I am not good in front of the camera by any means. My sister, I forced her to model for me because she just has a great face and she knows how to work a camera. I do not. So when I speak to my brides and my grooms, it's generally my grooms that are really anxious when we get to an engagement session. They've usually, when they've had a beer or a glass of wine with their wife, and they're like, maybe I took the edge off. I'm hoping I look good. But it's my job to make you feel comfortable. No one feels, I guess social media stars do, but no one in in normal life feels super comfortable with themselves in front of the camera. I really try and bring a fun ambiance. I want my clients to feel like themselves during our session. I would much rather have a fun conversation going between us, talking about, their pets, what their life is like, what they like to do, what they enjoy. And, along the way, I'm telling them, hey, you look great, because I'm making sure they look great, because if they don't, that reflects badly on me. So all parties involved, we want it to be a really just enjoyable and authentic experience, so that when they are in front of the camera, they don't feel the pressure of being in front of the camera. So that later on, when they look through their gallery, they're thinking to themselves, wow, we look great. That's us actually having fun. Whether it's because of my bad joke or something else, they're actually enjoying themselves in front of the camera.
All of your reviews say that. They talk about how extraordinary your artwork is, but also how you just completely dismantle their fear. And I think that's extraordinary to have such a gifted artist who also can caretake, because those don't always go together. And what I'm hearing in the life lessons that Rhonda was kind of talking about is what it took for you. You had this ability and this love, but you had incredible work ethic and hustle. And now, because of that, you also can be, but have to be selective. And I also hear the next part of the story, which is reinvention, like looking at what you do and trying to kind of make it fit into your life and to your passion, but to make it achievable. And I think that kind of ability to kind of self-reflect and then recreate, reinvent, that's a wonderful process that you have just talked about. It's really kind of
absolutely
cool.
I'd love to share a little bit more about that, actually, because that was a huge part of the journey. So I started my business in high school. It kind of, when I say business, I mean family portraits. It kind of just fell into place. When I graduated college, I immediately moved to a town I knew no one in. I was in Massachusetts. I worked for a photographer in Newport. So I was working full-time for him. I was doing my own work on the side, and then I was shooting 3 weddings per weekend. So it was just constant. And again, I was in my early 20s. It was great. I then worked for Hasbro Toy Company full-time as a toy photographer. I would go home and edit all night, and then I would do my own work on the weekends once I was no longer working for the other photographer. So again, 70, 80-hour week. It was just constant. And I never felt overworked because I was younger, but it was more of the drive to get where I wanted. I didn't really know what the end goal was. I just knew I wanted to feel fulfilled and have a successful business financially. Again, I was single, so I had a lot of time to just completely dive into this. In 2019, I had 34 weddings over the course of a New England wedding season, which typically ranges from about April or May until November. So it was just, and this was pre-COVID, it was constant. My husband and I actually got married that same year that I had 34 weddings in June in the middle of this. So the balance, looking back, I know how I did it because I'm crazy and I'm very type A, and I get things done and I force myself to keep up. But looking at it now and the balance I now have, I don't know how I did that. I don't suggest anyone doing that, but I learned a lot. I'm no longer working at venues 12 times a year, and I'm getting very selective, and I'm only working with full service wedding planners. But I think I just learned a hard lesson that you can't do everything. You need to be very selective. The hustle was absolutely crazy. And I did that for probably 10 years, maybe not to that extent, but in different ways, there was always a crazy hustle, which I think is the only reason. I know that's the only reason why I am where I am now, and I am as successful as I am. It was not easy. I know some people think that, it will just fall into place, and things do fall into place, but the hard work was just off the charts. And I think for anyone trying a new endeavor or just trying, a side hustle to bring that to a full-time hustle, something along those lines, you just have to be willing to commit all the time that is needed and make those sacrifices. I'm thankful that I have a 1.5-year-old now, and I learned those lessons right before he came into the world, because I don't know how. That would have been a mess. I would have been hiring a lot of people to help me. But it requires that passion. And if you don't love whatever the hustle is, it's probably not going to work out, because you will just be miserable. The amount of time that you have to commit is just, it's life sucking if you don't have your heart in it.
I'm glad that you bring that up because, people see you, when people see successful people, it feels like so effortless for you, or you imagine that it is, and you don't imagine the struggle that it takes to get there. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I have to say, I am an artist, I'm a painter, and my husband is a painter. And looking at your photographs, I feel like you've reinvented weddings because they really do all kind of look a little cookie cutter. It's very difficult to get wedding photos that look unique and personal to that person, even though I think each person feels that it's personal because it's them and it is personal. But yours are really, I think as Rhonda said earlier, they're so emotional and they don't even look like a wedding other than in some ways, some of them, except the bride has her outfit on or whatever, the clothing is there, but the personal, what you get out of of the people that you're photographing is really extraordinary. And it has to come out of all that certainly your passion and that hard work. And that you've set yourself up now to be able to shift into having a family and being able to choose how you're to do your work. And that comes from all that hard work before that. So I think that's a really important piece that you brought up.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have to just say, folks, you have to go right now to photographysv.com. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but like these photos they are pieces of art, and you're not working with models. These are human beings. But when I look at your work, well, first I think of my own cookie cutter wedding photos, and I long for something different. And yours, it's real. This is art. It is romantic. It's chic. It's classic. And it does feel like you've taken this moment, and people can look at that every time they pass it on their wall, feel that love or that just be taken back to that moment. And that's an extraordinary art form. I mean, how much art really does that?
Yeah. And if you have to evacuate your house, you are going to grab those photos. You are going to take them out.
No, thank you.
Are you still doing portrait work?
Absolutely. I do a lot of family portraits. What's really neat is I started more as a portrait photographer, as I mentioned, but I did a lot of newborn photography for a while prior to diving full time into weddings. So I've kind of been all over the map, but I'm able to follow my clients now from their engagement to when they get married, to when they have children, when they have families. So it's really nice. It's kind of like a lifelong friendship. I have a few clients that my husband and I have babysat their children, and I met them at their first child's newborn session. And now that newborn is now 10 years old, and we've become friends. And I just I see everyone at their best moments in their life, which is really special.
Oh,
yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Right now is the time that we need to shift into sort of our closing part of the show, unfortunately, because it's just, just so wonderful talking with you. But this is our golden nugget segment of the interview. And I think you've given us a lot of golden nuggets already, but I didn't know if there was any other golden nugget that you would have to offer for our viewers and listeners who are reinventing, starting in their second act. They're making a shift in life.
Sure. I think I have two. One would be make connections with people in your industry, the wedding industry, especially in the Boston area, but I think almost internationally now, they're very supportive. People are willing to help you for the most part. There is competition, but I mean, most of my business comes from friends of mine in the industry, and a lot of us bounce work back and forth because you can only be in one place at one time. So for us, it works great. But I think in every industry, there is some aspect of camaraderie that can really be helpful to when you're growing or just to learn more. And I would also say to people, go the extra mile. I think no one goes the extra mile anymore. So just those little things, just to let people know that you care about them, clients specifically, but just letting them know that you really care, you're really interested, and you're invested. I think that really goes a very long way, just so people feel cared for and not just like another client along the way.
That's beautiful.
2 great ones.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that. I unfortunately have the regrettable task of saying we're coming to a close. But before we do, what is next for you?
Next is hopefully what's happening right now. I mean, after COVID, it's It's been a little bit crazy, but the wedding industry is absolutely blowing up. And I have some really exciting clients that I'll be working with next year. So I think what's next is just really honing in on the clientele that speak to me, and hopefully I speak to them, and just finding the perfect fit for my clients, the dream weddings that speak to my art and really kind of bring out my creativity in its best way. And just kind of continuing along the journey while keeping my sanity and making sure that I book appropriately and kind of keep that steady flow going, rather than, taking on too much work and losing myself a little bit again.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. I'm so excited for people to get to know your art, but you are an extraordinary artist. And what's also extra extraordinary is just, you're such a lovely, practical, down-to-earth person. And I think often artists who are at your level don't always have like this real, genuine quality about their art, their love for what they do, their love for their subject matter and the people they're working with. I think that's why you're extraordinary. Plus your, those years you put in with the hustle and your willingness to go the extra mile. It's wonderful. This has been, really, to me, such wonderful role modeling and tangible ways for people listening to kind of get excited about their own art form or what they do in work. So we are so grateful for your time. We know that you are very busy, and this is a particularly busy time for you and your family. And I've loved this conversation. So thank you for sharing your art and yourself with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just to remind our viewers and listeners that if you want to find more out about Stephanie, you want to go to photographysv.com, and you can also find her on Instagram. And we're calling, she's Stephanie Vegliante, but if you look her up on Instagram, it's Veglinte is how you spell her last name, and on Facebook as well.
Yes, please look her up. With heart and intention, she does amazing things. Thank you. And thank you to our very talented and skilled production team.
And so I think it's left to me to say, well, thank you so much. And to our listeners out there, go forth, be brave, live well, and do good, because it's Act 2 and
you're on. Act 2 You're On was brought to you by Act 2 Share Our Stage. You can find us at a2yo.com and also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please listen and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. You can support us using Patreon. Thanks for listening.